Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Skip Rutherford. I'm Dean of the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service, and we welcome you tonight to another in our series of public programs under the direction of Nikolai DePippa, and I want to give a special thanks to him for the work that he has done in putting together all our programs, and also to our volunteers who help make all these possible. So a very special thanks to them and to all of you for coming tonight. We obviously have a larger than expected and a capacity crowd, and so people will keep coming in as we go through it, but that's all right. We'll make room. This is an important conversation to have. If I could ask everyone to please turn your cell phones and other electronic devices off because it interferes with our sound systems. And I thank you for doing that. Tonight's program is titled, Who is Occupy Little Rock? We know that Occupy Little Rock is one of over 350 Occupy movement cities in the United States, which began with Occupy Wall Street. According to news reports, and I cite news reports, Occupy is speaking out against corporate greed, economic unfairness, across-the-board tax cuts, tax policies, high foreclosures, high unemployment, campaign finance, and other issues. A recent CBS New York Times poll says 43% of Americans agree with the Occupy movement and 27% disagree. In recent days, police in New York City have followed law enforcement in Oakland, Portland, and Salt Lake City in removing Occupy members from city parks, citing public safety and public health concerns. Here, both the city of Little Rock and Occupy Little Rock about a month ago agreed to accept the movement of Occupy from the Clinton Presidential Park to city property, but not a park, next to the downtown post office. Recently, on the Morning Joe television program, former President Clinton, when asked about the Occupy movement, said, quote, "They have a right to be concerned about the shrinking of the middle class and rising poverty." Tonight, we welcome Occupy Little Rock to the Clinton School. And I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, and I've talked to each one of them and said if I've messed up, don't hold it personally, but we're honored and thrilled that they would take part and be a part of this discussion. Tim Brunson is a grandfather of three who has participated in the Occupy Little Rock camp since it began. He's a member of the Occupy Little Rock Donations Working Group. Marie O'Connor is a graduate of Hendrix College and the University of Central Arkansas. The mother of two, she is a part of the Occupy Little Rock Donations Working Book. Philip Mcgarry, certified 7th to 12th grade social studies teacher, plays a key role in the Occupy Education Working Group. And Aaron Stewart, a U.S. Navy veteran and Little Rock resident, who heads up the Occupy Little Rock Security Group. Those are our panelists. We're going to have some conversation, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. I would just ask when we do so, please raise your hand so we can get the microphone to you, because we are recording this. So if you would just wait till the microphone gets there. All right, everybody, I'd like, if we could start, if each of you would talk about what you think Occupy Little Rock is, why you are involved, and where you see it going. And I think, Aaron, why don't we start with you? If you got that, if you'll use that microphone, yeah.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe that the Occupy movement is something that is obviously important. I'll get right to the chase. Our country is soon to be $16 trillion in debt. We have no feasible means of correcting that in legislation as we speak. Congress has kind of failed us as far as addressing this debt for the last 20 to 30 years, and the debt continues to compile. If you add that to the corruption and greed that is surmounting in Wall Street, which led to the 2008 bailouts, which was using everybody in here, using your tax dollars to bail out corporations for bad business practices and rewarding them for their bad business practices, you can't help but be a little bit angry. And I think that the Occupy movement is the people voicing that anger to the American public and trying to get everybody to come together and make a stand.
Marie? We'll just pass the microphone down here.
I think I can probably second most of what you said, actually. And for me, it's important to say that as we sit here as panelists, I don't think that we can represent all of what Occupy Little Rock or Occupy Wall Street is. It's a far more diverse group than this panel of four can show you. And so I think I have to say that for me, the reasons why I think Occupy is what it has been the influence of corporate money in politics and how that came to be, and the things that could happen to reverse that, as well as, since our recession began, the increasing levels of poverty in our country, especially here in Arkansas, where basically 1 in 4 children, that's a quarter of our kids, are living in poverty. And as the adults, it's our responsibility to do something about that. But for me, I recently graduated from New Brunswick Theological Seminary, and in the in-between time of being a technically unemployed, not yet pastor, I found myself realizing that my faith led me to be a part of this movement, because Jesus said that what you do to the least of these, you're doing to me. And for me, that meant that this time needs to be spent loving the people that Jesus loves. So that's why I'm here, although it's a very political action.
Hi, I'm Philip Mcgarry, as mentioned before. I have been an activist before. I've been involved in things at DC, and I don't claim to speak for the Occupy Little Rock movement. I'm only a member here. I'm not a leader. I'm just a concerned citizen. And I believe that that's essentially what Occupy Little Rock is about. We think that citizens have taken too much of a passive role within our political system. And we're trying to urge people to be active in their political process, to take a part, to take responsibility for your government. Because ultimately, I don't believe that we as the people are being represented. I think that elite segments are being represented right now. And that's a shame. I think that occupying public space is ultimately a great way to show that this is our country, that public space belongs to the people, not to the governments who are supposed to represent those people. And that's personally why I'm here, and I'll continue to be here.
Well, I'm here because I saw a notice on Facebook that some folks needed a stove. I happen to have one, and I was willing to show up and participate in changing the system to the extent that I possibly could to more reflect the values of the American people. And I'm kind of fed up with the system being the way that it's been for so long, that it benefits a few, and there are so many who are paying into a system that does not reflect their needs. I'm someone who very much believes in public funding of political campaigns, and I'd like to support that to the extent that I can, and just see us perhaps focus a little bit more on social needs and not just political and financial gain as a motivator in our society. I've got 3 grandchildren and a daughter that I love very much, and I'm here not so much for me as for them, because I'd like for them to have a future that is just full of promise.
Could one or each of you or all of you comment on the fact that you were in the Clinton Park there for a few days, and then Occupy in the city of Little Rock worked out a deal where you would move from the park because they didn't the ordinance said you couldn't sleep in the park. Would you comment on the fact of how you all worked with the city of Little Rock and how some other movements across the country are having apparently very difficult issues in either finding common ground or dealing with various city ordinances? So it's like you might talk about the Little Rock relationship and how that compares with the rest of the country.
Sure, I'll answer that question. We went into this movement when we first decided. We actually spent a great deal of time planning our occupation. We had several locations that we decided would be the best to make a statement, and we have ultimately chose the Clinton Library. We went into it knowing that there was a chance for arrest, but nobody wanted that. Although we may have been willing to do that to stand up for what we consider to be our rights, I don't think anybody wanted to be arrested. I think there are some people out there that do have some radical ideas, sure. That's just a representation of the American populace. The American populace have radicals out there. But as a whole, the movement itself, especially here in Little Rock, we want to do something within the system to change the system for the positive. So we owe a great deal of thanks to the chief of police here at Little Rock. He came out and he reached out to us and said, hey, I understand what you're doing. Unfortunately, you are breaking the codes, and we have this option for you. And it says a lot to our movement that we're not out there just being bullheaded. We want to make a change, and we want to be flexible, and we want to do it within the confines of the law as much as we possibly can. And after some great deal of discussion, we ultimately agreed that the ability to have a place to work out of and to make a long-term change was more important than the snap decision and the flash shock of a few people being arrested. And we took it, and it's worked out wonderfully for us. And we've been able to prosper and continue to grow that relationship with the police department as a result. So it was a win-win situation.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Any other comments on that? Well, good, Aaron. You spoke for the group and did quite well, by the way. All right, now, you talked about long-term movement. And there are some who say that the movement has peaked across the country, and that it is that it's going to fizzle out. But somebody, would you discuss that? Different views on this.
Well, I just don't believe that that's evidenced by what we're seeing at the various Occupy sites around the nation and the number of people that are showing support for this movement. It's growing constantly, certainly in Central Arkansas. We're having amazing support from the public. Many people who have wonderful jobs that they're very grateful for, but would like to see some changes in this country have been coming out and providing us with the things that perhaps we can't provide for ourselves in the numbers that we need. But we have had no lack of support whatsoever, and what little bit of contact that I've had with Facebook since I've been on the occupation zone has been very limited. I've sort of been in the kitchen, and tech is over on the other side of camp. I don't get that far very long. But the support is enormous, and the causes are something that speak to Americans everywhere. And the more people get the word that they have an opportunity to participate in some change in this country that's positive and reflects the values of Americans, I believe the movement's going to keep growing.
Anybody else? Sure.
Just speaking directly to the idea that the movement has peaked, I think that's very premature to be suggesting that kind of thing, especially since after what happened on Wall Street with the eviction and then going back into Zuccotti Park, seems to have really energized the base of people who are saying, no, it's not right, and is the being kicked out and no more tents for you, the what's not right? No, it's the issues behind it. And I know that at our occupation site here in Little Rock, we've done a lot of thinking about what's the future going to look like, both into the winter in our physical occupation and into the future for the other activities that we have planned and the kinds of changes that we would like to see happen, not just nationwide, but in our state. And if there's any question whatsoever about whether or not Occupy Wall Street or Occupy Little Rock is going to continue, I can put that to rest right now. It is.
So tell us about the winter. What do you have planned?
First, it will get cold. And
I
then it
don't
will
know.
probably snow.
I don't know about that either.
We've got a couple of people in our camp, and I'm speaking a bit out of turn because I don't get the opportunity to stay overnight very long, but we have some very skilled individuals who have said that they are definitely going to step up and train us all in winter survival tactics. Which we thank them for. But we are also putting into place plans to make sure that we have the means by which to stay warm, to have adequate water, hygiene, food. I can't really explain it all right now, but we're thinking about it and we're talking about it and we're trying to make absolutely certain that nothing like chilblains stops us from continuing to have a presence for as long as we possibly can. And we've considered some plan Bs and Cs, which we don't want to use, but we've done some thinking. And if you have ideas, feel free to share them. But I think winter is going to be an adventure, but it's going to be an adventure anyway.
So are you satisfied with your space in terms of staying for the winter? Do you see looking at other locations, even expanding to other, or moving to other parts of Little Rock, or helping occupy groups in other parts of the state? I mean, do you see staying put, growing, what?
We actually have contact right now with several of the other Occupy movements in the state as well as across the country. One of our members right now is currently in Zuccotti Park and is acting as a correspondent to kind of consolidate ideas and get everybody on the same page. Obviously, the culture of Central Arkansas is different than the culture of New York. There are going to be differences. It's the overarching message that remains the same that everybody can agree on. And we're putting together a little bit of literature, which we have passing around out here in the form of petition, to try and join everybody together so that we don't look like we're so disorganized. Because the mistake is being made that we are disorganized, and that's not the case. The problem is that we can't address just one side of the problem. The problem reaches across many lines: party lines, financial lines, and institutional lines. And therefore it becomes muddled and it looks more disorganized, but it's just that we have to widen our scope of vision to really envision the whole entirety of the problem. And that's what we're doing by reaching out to all of these other Occupy movements and getting everybody on the same page.
Yes, yeah, Phil.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as long as they're out there in New York and Zuccotti Park in New York winter, it would be a shame if we left during Arkansas winter.
So do you have ongoing conversations with the city? Because I know that they've blocked the lot off. I know that they have the porta potties out there. I mean, do you have ongoing conversations with them to say, we're in for the long haul. This is not a 2-week deal. We're prepared to camp through winter and beyond. Are there conversations going on with them?
Yes, absolutely. We actually had the chief of police stop by today and talk to us to make sure that everything was okay, as well as Lieutenant Governor Dunn. They're all aware that we are there and that we are not going anywhere.
The permit, from what I understand, does not have a termination date. It is open-ended, and we will be there, it's my understanding and my feeling, as long as it's necessary.
Yeah, I was just asking in terms of the city providing the support and the things that they're doing. I was just wanted to see if there were ongoing relationships with the city, and Aaron just answered.
I think as of right now, the city has not indicated any end to the relationship or any change so far.
Are you getting any grief from any of the other Occupy movements from around the country about working with the city? Or are you going to all of them and saying, y'all ought to follow our example?
I think all the Occupy movements around the country kind of have their own problems to worry about. And so at this point, there isn't that much communication. There are some people that we've had that have been traveling through and sharing stories about what's going on in the other Occupy sites. And obviously we have through the internet, and we can watch live streams from other Occupy sites and things like that, and they can watch ours as well. But yeah, there hasn't been that communication very much.
And maybe one of y'all can answer this one. On a given night, how many people are camping at night? And then how many people would you say would be involved either in a formal or informal Occupy Little Rock? If you're reaching out on Facebook and email, and how many people would you say would be in your organization?
We usually go somewhere between 20 and 26 people that are physically occupying, that we refer to one another as residents. That's on my Facebook. My new address is Occupy Little Rock. And that's hopefully where I'll get my mail here before too long.
Well, you're pretty close to the post office. You
Well,
can,
that's very close to the post office. Very close to the post
you
office.
might get personal delivery, you know.
But the number of supporters that we have in the community is just phenomenal. The day does not go by that someone doesn't come by dropping something off, blankets, socks, food, ice. And I just personally like to thank all of you for that.
So how many people would you say are involved in the movement that, you know, that are like when you scheduled a march or you call a group meeting, or, and I realize it's a very loose organization and that's one of the strengths of it, but I was just wondering how many would you say?
Right now, we have about 1,200 people on the Facebook page of Occupy LR, and then on the group page, which is another one, we have about 700 members, between 600 and 700 members, which there's not very many overlapping. A lot of those members are coming from other Occupy sites that are keeping up with the news and whatnot. My guesstimate would be anywhere between a strong 1,500 to 2,000 people that are strongly supporting us and active every day as far as following with what's going on, and that number continues to grow every day.
So what are your plans over the next month besides the camp? How do you, I mean, are you marching or what? What are you going to be doing?
We have a march set up for December 17th. It's called the Winter at Valley Forge March, in the spirit of the winter preparations during the American Revolution. The idea behind the march is to get publicity for a public forum that we want to have sometime in January. And we're going to invite local community activist organizations. We're going to invite several different people that have been doing work within the city, and hopefully have a public discussion. We're also going to invite the Chamber of Commerce, local politicians, things of that nature. Yeah, we're just trying to create a public dialogue. Also, we have certain petitions that we're going to start circulating around the other Occupy sites and start coordinating with them. And those have to do with 4 things: reinstating Glass-Steagall Act, which was a banking act around the Great Depression. Another thing is repealing of the Patriot Act. Another thing. Another thing is overturning Citizens United. And the 4th thing is congressional reform, which would limit congressional term and congressional pay and things of that nature to put Congress back on the level of the people that they serve.
We also informally, every day at 11 o'clock, have a march that goes somewhere in Little Rock. We've got a wonderful person who's accepted responsibility for that, and y'all are welcome to show up at any time and just go pay some folks in the city a visit and just let them know how you feel. 11 o'clock every day.
So describe a day in the camp. I know you got your 11 o'clock march, but describe, you know, in terms of your committees, how you function. What's it like?
Well, actually, it's very informal. We have our regular GAs, which are on even days of the month. At 7 o'clock, everyone's invited. We're having one.
We're having one tonight after this, here. You're invited.
But we come up with the strategies of what it is that we need to start working on, where our weaknesses are. We try to strengthen those and make them strengths and have assignments. And part of our day is just working towards common goals, and those could be varied in so far as outreach and developing call lists. Right now, we're spending a lot of time on winterization of the camp. Is something that we've just got to go ahead and take the time to prepare for so that we will have the leisure time to devote to other interests that we have in getting the word out around the city and around the state.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all, by the way, for the very very open and honest discussion. Now, we're going to throw it open to questions. So I ask you, raise your hand, please. We'll get the microphone to you, and then we'll let me call on you. Yes, ma'am, right here. Please, no statements, please. Questions. I want to let everybody get through with questions. Okay?
Yes, this is to address what he mentioned about have you all peaked, and it was just like seconds before that I asked my husband, should we start supporting? So we want to know that we will be supporting you, whether it's blankets or MONEY, and that will answer the peak. So it hadn't peaked yet because we just got on the bandwagon on this thing. And two, do you have anything set up where people who wants to remain undercover and anonymous for donations?
But of course you can. Basically, the way that we've handled donations is that we've got a little notebook that we try and make sure we write down what people are bringing, and we do try and keep a list of how much money is on hand and that kind of stuff. And while we would like to get people's names and contact information in order to contact you again if we need something like, or we just want to tell you thank you, we have a number of anonymous donors who have said, you know, thanks for just doing what you're doing. Here are my eggs. Take the eggs. I'm gone. So absolutely, we really want to respect the individuals who are being so kind as to provide us with stuff. That said, the flip side is that we're not accepting sponsors. If anyone comes forward and says, I have this great gift I want to give you, if you would just put up my business's name or my name, we kind of politely say, we'll take that, but we won't do that. We don't have sponsors.
All right.
Thank you.
Questions? I believe somebody over. Yes, ma'am, right there.
Is anyone allowed to come and camp? Do you have any sort of vetting or requirements in order to be a part of the encampment?
We do have a few things that are extra. We try to make sure that everybody is welcome. Lessons learned, we do have a short registration form, and all of that is so that we know a point of contact for emergency in the event that something was to happen, as well as just an idea of who is there, because we don't want to have the instance of unsafe individuals coming into camp and causing a problem. Our permit is very precious to us, obviously, because we are one of the few cities in the nation that has that, and we don't want people to come in and just lay around and do bad things. So we do have a small registration form, and we do have a process. But everybody's welcome. There's more than plenty space. Come on out and camp with us for a night, a week, a month if you want to. If you can't camp, just come on out during the day, and we'll be more than happy to hang out with you and talk and hear what you have to say. The only thing is that we ask that there are no weapons, there are no alcohol, there is no illegal substances or mind-altering substances. We're not out there to party. We're out there to do something good for this country.
Okay, we have a question right over here.
I've been involved a little bit, and as I've tried to get other people to be involved, they ask me, who's in charge? Because people of a certain age don't expect authority, but we kind of expect somebody to be in charge. Help us with the General Assembly process and the organic nature of decision-making of the movement, because I still don't understand it.
The way we make decisions within our organization is the process of the General Assembly. Basically, the way this works is we make propositions to the group. We bring it forward, we have a discussion about it, and then we vote on it as a unit. Now, the difference between our process and a strictly majority rule democratic process is that any one person within the group can block the proposal. So therefore, everyone within the group has to either agree or agree to abstain from voting or for the proposal in order for it to pass. So that's the way we've been operating. It's completely leaderless. You're only as involved as you want to be. And yeah.
Okay, we have a question right here in the back.
You have some very ambitious goals, overturning Citizens United, reforming Congress. There's quite a bit of collective wisdom gained over the past century of how to effect major social change. Dr. Martin Luther King, for example, was a great leader who showed us the way to do things. Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, pretty much laid out the groundwork for how you actually get stuff done in the real world. A lot of your techniques seem to fly in the face of all of that collective wisdom. How do you respond to that? Do you really want to achieve big things? And if so, are you going to continue to try to do it in the way you've been doing it?
Well, we live in an age right now.
No, turn it back on. He just hadn't turned it on.
I'll try this one. How's this? Okay. Martin Luther King did not have Facebook or cell phones or social media. We are on the cusp of something that our society has never seen before, and that means that if you're walking down the street and you see something that catches your eye, within a matter of seconds you can show it to the world. And we are utilizing that very asset that we have to make the change. It's worked in Egypt, it's working in Greece, it worked in Libya, and it was something that has never been seen before. So while we can learn from a lot of mistakes of previous movements, we can also take the new technology that we have and use that as a tool to do something completely different. And the fact that this has grown from 27 people in a small park in New York City to a matter of countries across the entire nation, and it's simply through the mouth and word of the internet and social media, I mean, there's no real limit on what we can possibly do by simply getting a basic idea of human nature and what it's about to be a human in this world across to the people, because everybody can agree on some things as far as what's right and what's wrong and what needs to be done. And the power is in the people, not in the government, and we have forgot that as a nation, and we're trying to wake people up. And we can do that as long as we just talk about it and stop sitting around and being lazy and actually get out and do something.
All right. Yes, sir, right up here.
Regarding the relationship between all the other people in the Occupy movements across the globe, I should say more so across the nation, or just specifically, I guess. I would just like to ask if there's any message that you guys can give, seeing how the movement here has been so peaceful as opposed to all the other places around the nation, at least most of them. If there's any, general message you can give about, dealing with authority and legislature in general.
I think that we've been really fortunate in being able to work with the police within our city. But I don't think that every Occupy group has that luxury, and that's essentially what I see it as. If the police were to come down on us when we were here and not given us this opportunity to talk it over and all these positive things in this new location, I think it would have went down very much here as it did elsewhere. So let's give it up for the LRPD for that.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Hillary and I'm a Clinton School student. I think it's so admirable, your commitment to change, and I really commend you for that. I think it's very brave. My question is about statewide initiatives that you'd like to see happen because of this. You talked about wanting to create change within Arkansas, and I'm curious about the details of what changes you're talking about. Thanks.
I'll take that one. Details can be a little bit more difficult because in some regards we just have to say, well, we're not to that point yet. And what the gentleman asked earlier was whether or not we might ever be, looking at using Congress in the same methods that have been used in movements past. And the answer is, yeah, we might use those. That seems to be one way of doing it. Regarding what's happening here in Arkansas, ideas that have been tossed around and things that we think we're going to be moving towards is I've heard movement, and I myself am actually pretty interested in trying to close the loopholes in our banking practices here. We've already legislated out some of the banking practices of those predatory payday lenders. That's already been ousted, except that there are some loopholes allowing a few nationwide banks to still offer that kind of loan to their customers. And that's something that I personally am interested in seeing go away. I also think that we are interested in talking via petitions, like the one Patrick Kelly Cooper, he's a high school student, guys, put together for us, asking our legislatures to continue and to consider being a part of some House reform bills and some other things that are happening in Congress. That's two that kind of come to mind very quickly. And then I think we're also concerned as to what's happening in Arkansas with the unemployment rate. Yes, it's lower than the national unemployment rate, but it's slowly creeping up there. And our underemployment rate is actually much higher in the state of Arkansas than it is in the nation. And I think one question we can have is that we have a lot of very big corporations making their headquarters here in Arkansas, and we can start asking ourselves whether or not their employment practices and how they employ their part-time workers is really what's best for this state. Now, that last one is me, it's my idea, I've talked about that. But as far as what Arkansas and what we think we should do here, there are ideas floating around, and I think what happens is that as we talk to one another and talk to the people, we start hearing that there's one idea that just keeps coming up, and then someone says, well, why don't we start a petition? Or have we talked to that guy yet? And that's how it begins. That's how we start. And once we start figuring out who are the individuals, the actual people involved, that's when we can start saying, well, I think our next step is this, and that's how we do it.
Yes, we got a question right here.
Yes, I guess maybe there are many people out there my age with white hair and whatnot, and I'm not into Facebook. And my wife and I have been fortunate to be able to travel for the last 7 weeks in a lot of states, from Wichita all the way out to DC. And each time I've talked to people there, and they don't know how to partake, be part of it, other than to, help you out where you are. So is there any idea of having like one central site nationwide, and you put a zip code in and see where things are happening, where the next marches are, what functions are going to have happening, like you just said one here, we're not from Little Rock, but people, so that they can go one place and get all this information?
First, we have to stop arresting everybody in the Occupy movement so that we can actually work towards that. We have had some rumored talk about holding what's called a national GA or a national convention. We're working first, I think, for a statewide general assembly, just taking a group of people and putting them together and say, look, this is what we've done over the last several months. These are the ideas that we come up with. We've talked to you over phone, but now we're looking at you face and face, because nothing beats an eye-to-eye contact when you're speaking to somebody. And those are definitely things that we're working for. We actually don't have any dates set for that. As soon as we do, we will let you know, because our General Assembly process, no matter if it's here in Little Rock or Conway or Russellville, Fayetteville, these other Occupy sites, or a state or national, everybody is welcome. And I guarantee you that as soon as we have that, you guys will have that as well. But we are working towards that. We just got to get everybody kind of communicating, as well as get them out of jail first.
We have a question right over here, Caroline, if you'll give me that.
Thank you. It sounds like the thrust of your movement, or at least the events that started your movement, were the bailouts, some of the Wall Street bailouts. That's kind of what I'm getting. I think that the Tea Party movement also kind of started for the same reason. Can you please tell me how the Occupy movement is different from the Tea Party movement?
Okay, looks like I get to have that one too. All right. I'll shut up after this. There's not a whole lot different. The difference, I myself, whenever the Tea Party first came out, I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, and unfortunately, the military, you're not allowed to really partake in things of that nature, especially in uniform, they frown. But it was something that was very honorable, I think. You know, it was the same thing that we're doing. They took a stand. And one of the problems that we have in America today is that there's so much focus on Republican versus Democrat. There's this partisan politics, and then there's no crossing across the lines. And unfortunately, the Tea Party became sponsored. Like we said, we don't take these, sponsorships. We don't want, we're not trying to say that if you're a Democrat, you're bad, or if you're a Republican, we're bad. What we're trying to say is that we want to have some sort of, purity to the movement so that it doesn't get absorbed into a political party, because our problems reach well across party lines. And when the Tea Party started becoming more aligned towards a conservative views or something like that, their message really did change. The core message was spoken the same, but the underlying tones became different. And that's where we differ. The overall problem is the same, and it's something that every American can agree on, whether you're a part of the Tea Party, the Republican Party, or the Democratic Party. That's what really makes this movement so special, is it's something that everybody, no matter what you feel, or where you live, or what you make, or what you do for a living, you can say, ding, oh, that makes sense, you're right. And as long as we can keep that idea sound, we can take the people who are at the ground roots of the Tea Party, and they can look at us and be like, hey, maybe they're saying the same things I am, and then we can continue to really grow and get that message out there.
If I could just speak for a moment on that.
Sure.
The Tea Party, it's my understanding, they look at government as a problem. And what I've seen in this movement is that we tend to dig a little bit deeper and see those who are buying government with their contributions. And also the revolving door from government into private industry is something that's just got to stop.
Right? Yes, sir. Right here. Question.
This is a
He'll come on. He'll have to turn off the bass.
This is a simpler question. One of the strong elements of your message has been we're the 99%, or at least nationally that's been. I'm just wondering what kind of feedback here in Central Arkansas in Little Rock have you gotten, if any, about that element, we are the 99%?
I don't believe anyone's confronted us directly on that issue. Murray wants to speak.
There's been just a little bit of that. I can remember back at our second march, there was someone, and I didn't hear them, but they were like, "No, I'm not the 99%." And you can Wikipedia what that means if you want to. We've had overwhelming support for it. There has been some concern about it as to what exactly does that mean, and so I actually went to Wikipedia. I was like, I'm going to have this with me when I get up here to talk. And what that phrase is referring to is the growing disparity in wealth since 1979 to 2007 between the top 1% and everybody else. And the top 1% of American wage earners, their income rose 275%. While the middle income during that same time only rose 40%. Yes, they both rose, but the difference between them is part of the issue. And part of that has also been because the federal program of taxing has become less progressive. And so that is one possible, likely cause for that. And one thing that we can say is that in that 1%, the average income within that 1% is $960,000. The average income for the top 1% of American earners. The minimum income in the top 1% is $343,000. The Arkansas average median income is around $37,000. Arkansas is second highest in the nation for poverty. We're number 2. Thank goodness for Mississippi.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. We have a question right over here. Right here, ma'am. Right here in front of you.
My question kind of piggybacks off what he just asked you. You know, you guys have had a lot of attack from the media about y'all's diversity and opinions and ideas and the people of your group. but some of us rather would see that as a strength and that y'all do represent the 99%. So my question is, how have y'all been combating tactics like that from the media to discredit your ability and your movement?
I can talk now. Well, it starts off, the media relationship really begins with them coming out, and they have about as much information about our movement as the average American who's been watching the news. And so when they first started coming out to talk about our movement and asking what's going on, while there may have been a few that were ready to have their story written before they got there, for the most part, they walked in and started asking questions. And once they start asking questions, most generally, when anybody comes up and asks questions, they really start to understand that what's being spoken about on the news in the short little 20 seconds that we get isn't really the entirety of the movement. And we've had several of the media understand that, and then they become a real media outlet, and they come to cover the story non-biased. And they're not out there, trying to help us. They're not out there trying to hurt us either. And if you guys have paid attention from the beginning of the movement, from the march on October 15th to where we are now, there has been quite a bit of difference in the dialect that is coming out of the media. And that's how we just kind of talk to them. That's how we deal with it.
If I could, please, one of the things that we keep being challenged with is how do we define what it is that we're trying to do? And it's really hard whenever it's like death from 1,000 cuts, that we've got people with a lot of different issues that we feel passionately about, and we're just starting this conversation, this soup of ideas. And this is a young movement. It's only been here for a short while. And we're just now starting to come together and to coalesce around some ideas that we can have a very large percentage of support for. And that will be forthcoming, I'm sure, very soon. The more conversations that we're having, the more we get to know one another and what we're looking for in a government and in a country. We'll know more, and we'll be able to present a clearer message at that time.
Yes, ma'am, right here. We have a question. Wait for the microphone, please.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's on. They'll turn it on.
Okay, obviously you have a lot of support here tonight, and I think that's just fine. The point is, you have a lot of things here that you want to do, some stated facts like repeal the Patriot Act, overturn the Citizens United, congressional reform. How do you hope to do that? This is a democratic system, for lack of a better word. Do you hope to back a candidate, or how are you going to do this? You can't just, if you can't put a measure before them, it's not ever going to get voted on.
Right now, we're in the stage of creating a petition for that, so we're passing it around the other Occupy camps just to get signatures on this so that we can say, look, a large number of people care about this issue. And basically, the tactic is to create public awareness of these issues. I don't think a lot of people, when I said reinstate Glass-Steagall, I don't think a lot of people in here knew what that meant. And maybe by starting these petitions, we can start to get people to think about these issues and to do research and to become aware and have that public dialogue, because that's essentially what I see this movement as being.
Yeah, right here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and coming away from your residence, your temporary residence there. Mine's a two-part question. The first one is, what are you going to do for Thanksgiving? And then the second one would be, after the books came out, like The Big Short, I think it was in 2008, 2009, something like that, a lot of the books that followed, talking about the crash of Wall Street and what was going on. What was it about this particular movement? What was it that made it happen now? I mean, why wait what made you individually join the movement right now, and what took it, do you think, took it so long to actually start after the crash of Wall Street? So, thank you.
I'll say something about that. For Thanksgiving, I think we need to decide whether or not we want to do Thanksgiving. Do it in the camp. There have been a couple offers from some churches and some organizations to feed us at their location, and I think probably in the next couple days we're going to have to decide, are we going to go somewhere or are we just going to host it? We haven't made that decision yet. We've got a couple weeks. Wait. With the Wall Street crash and why it's taken so long for this to happen, I think there was I think the election of Obama did have something to do with it. Because the movement is fairly young and there's a lot of young-ish people in it, his election kind of signified something that we had hoped for. And I saw it kind of written somewhere today that, the fact that not much actually seems to have changed may have had a part of that, and I'm going to let Philip here talk for a moment. But I also think the hit of the recession and the realization that nothing was going to get better, and that for many folks that were coming out of college with heavy student debt and no jobs to take, were finding themselves staying at mom and dad's house, not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't afford rent. And I think that just kind of coalesced, and there's a whole bunch of people that realize that at the same time. I can't leave mom and dad's house, and I really want to.
Okay, Philip Scott,
I
go ahead.
actually want to say something about that. I'd mentioned that I'd done some activism in D.C. Before, and essentially I see the timing for this movement coming out of a number of things. The global justice movement, for instance, which was around in the late 90s and early part of the 2000s, we're talking about things about corporations exploiting foreign countries, different things like that, things about privatization of public services in foreign countries, and different issues like that. There was the big Seattle WTO protest where there was horrific police brutality involved in that situation, and that was in 1999. After that, there was the anti-war movement. So a lot of the people in the global justice movement switched over to being anti-war people. And they have been working on that for a while, and those groups of people have been coalescing. But I really think the thing that really kicked off Occupy Wall Street and made the people in New York think that now is the time to take action was the Arab Spring, was these revolutions in the Middle East that came from horrible dictatorships. And these people were able to communicate, they were able to organize, and they were able to ultimately take control of their own destiny and create democratic structures within those societies. And I think that was the inspiration for Occupy Wall Street.
Yes, from the back, right here.
Hi. Regarding my question, I think you guys are in a unique position given your ability to work with local authorities and arrive at the agreement for this location that you're occupying now. So I'd like to know from your perspective locally, and if you could speculate on the national movement, what, if any, role do you think civil disobedience, friction with authorities, even up to and including arrests, what role, if any, do those play in helping to, I hate to sound cynical, but helping to get the media's attention, to help spread the message, perhaps have positive or negative impact on the movement as a whole?
There's a YouTube video out that came out yesterday from Keith Oberman, and he mentioned the fact that Mayor Bloomberg in the city of New York cited the fact that there was too much of a noise in Zuccotti Park and too close to a residential area, and that it was a health hazard, and that it was a problem with all of these list of things that are obvious needs for them to be removed. And then he fought them with sound. He had these loud, painful speakers that inflicted pain upon people, and he also went in with tear gas and pepper spray and all of these things. He violated a court order. The occupiers there had a court order. And what that does is that creates an awareness in the American public. These are all sensationalist and shock things that the media is going to put out there, whether they spin it or not. And through that and social media, everybody's looking at this going, really? You pepper sprayed an 84-year-old woman in the face? For what? And that, it's an unfortunate thing that we don't want to happen. Like I said earlier, we don't want to be arrested. But if it's something that brings to light the police state that is becoming America, then it's got to be known. And I think it's a positive thing for the movement, but it's a horrible tragedy for the Americans that are experiencing that.
Yes, ma'am, this lady in the front row here.
Would you address the makeup of the overall group? We understand about the people who are camping, but address the makeup of the overall group. You know, are they young? Are they old? Are they working? Are they out of work? And also, well, I forgot the other part. Never mind.
Are you referring to Occupy Wall Street or Little Rock? Us? I think one thing that's important to know is that we have a terrible lack of unemployed hippies. We really need some more. So if you know of any, send them our way. The vast majority of Occupy Little Rock is employed full-time, living in homes, has families, and are unable to occupy full-time, which is why our numbers living in the actual Occupy site are lower than you might think. But supporting them are hundreds, if not perhaps thousands of people who think it's a good idea. From what I have seen, especially given the makeup of Arkansas, I am not happy with the representation of minorities, although we do have them. I'm not on this panel. But it also seems to be split 50-50 between males and females. And I am always very pleased to see at General Assemblies, which are between 40 and 60 people, depending, that a wide variety of ages. We have high school students all the way up to, I think someone said they were 72. And so it's a wide variety of people, and I'm very happy that although it's a youthful movement, it is not completely led by the youth. I think those are the big points about who our group is. I am always surprised to discover how diverse we are on our political leanings, as well as religious and all other ways. I think I have met one of everything, at the very least. And that's really good. Someone earlier said diversity being a bad thing. Absolutely not. Diversity is incredibly important to this movement, and it is intentionally, as best as we can, an anti-racist, anti-sexist, pro-people movement. And if the minute it stops being that, I think it will lose its power. But so long as we are actually representing the 99%, I think it will continue to grow in strength.
Yes, ma'am, right here.
I have a couple of things to ask. One, your needs, are they posted somewhere? Are they posted on the internet or something as to what your needs are?
Yes, we have a needs list both on Facebook and on our little, it's occupylr.org site.
Thank you. I'm curious, because you've had such cooperation with the police department, have you invited local, state, and federal officials to meet with you? Pryor, Ross, Bozeman, the governor? Have you asked any of those people? Because I am a person who believes that you must be inclusive. You can be exclusive in what you want to achieve, but you have to be inclusive. And somehow it seems to me that you'll achieve so much more if they are included in your process.
We've had a meeting with the North Little Rock mayor. We asked to meet with the Little Rock mayor, and he has declined. We have reached out to the local and state legislation to try and speak with them and open up that conversation. Before we actually occupied on your guys' front yard, we tried to speak to the mayor and several state officials of trying to get a permit for 2 weeks almost. I mean, we went through hoops and we hollered and we yelped and everything else, and we were stonewalled, and we continue to be stonewalled. Today is the first time that anybody outside of this city that is involved in government has really stepped up and said anything to us, and he came out for 5 minutes and asked a couple questions, and then his assistant said it was time to go. So while we have not had any serious dialect, I personally, from my own point of view, am open to debate with anyone in the state of Arkansas in any position of power or authority, and I will debate you on anything. And I would love to hear what you have to say about us.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this. I know there's a lot of questions, and clearly when we organized this program on who is Occupy Little Rock, all of us had questions, and many of them were answered tonight. But our time has run out. Hopefully the panel members and other Occupy people will be around for a while to answer any individual questions. But you can see by the large crowd, far more than we expected, by the way. So for some of you that didn't RSVP, bad on you, but that's okay. We're glad to have you. We're glad to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause to Occupy Little Rock.